Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why your eyes get wider when you are surprised or stressed? Well, new research is shining a light on what is really going on inside your brain when your pupils change size. We all know that feeling when something exciting or scary happens, our pupils get bigger. For a long time, scientists thought this was mainly linked to one specific chemical in our brain called noradrenaline, which is produced in a tiny area called the locus coeruleus. Think of noradrenaline as the brain's alertness chemical. This connection between pupil size and noradrenaline has been a big deal, because measuring pupil size is super easy and non-invasive. It seemed like we could get a direct window into our brain's arousal levels just by looking at someone's eyes. But what if that is too simple? What if it is not just about noradrenaline? That is the big question this new study tackles. The researchers behind this paper felt like the scientific world might be a bit too focused on the noradrenaline story when it comes to pupil size. They noticed that a lot of research, especially when it involved humans, tended to say pupil size means noradrenaline activity and didn't really consider other possibilities. So they decided to do a deep dive. Imagine they went through hundreds and hundreds of scientific papers that talked about pupil size and arousal, basically looking for clues. They focused on papers published from 2017 onwards, because around then some researchers started suggesting that other brain chemicals might be involved too. They looked at studies done on humans and studies done on other animals, like monkeys and mice. And what they found was pretty striking. In studies involving humans, over half of the papers that discussed pupil size and arousal only mentioned noradrenaline. But when they looked at studies on animals, especially for certain chemicals like acetylcholine, they found mentions of other brain systems more often. This suggests that in human research, there is a strong habit of defaulting to the noradrenaline explanation. Even when papers mention noradrenaline, less than half of the human studies also bother to mention any of the other brain chemicals that could be influencing pupil size. This really highlights that noradrenaline-centric bias they talked about. It's like if you only ever looked for a red car when you were trying to find a lost pet, even if the pet might have been a different color. The researchers point out that there is solid evidence showing pupil dilation can happen even when the locus coeruleus isn't active. So it is not the only game in town. They remind us that other important brain chemicals like acetylcholine, serotonin, dopamine, and even something called orexin from the hypothalamus can also play a role in how our pupils behave. These chemicals are like the brain's messengers, controlling everything from focus and mood to sleep and wakefulness, and they all have widespread connections throughout the brain. This bias, the researchers argue, isn't just a small semantic issue. It actually limits how scientists think about the underlying brain mechanisms. If you always assume it is noradrenaline, you might miss out on understanding how other brain systems are working together to influence our thoughts and actions. It is like trying to understand a symphony but only listening to the violins, ignoring the drums, flutes, and brass. Now, the researchers are smart enough to acknowledge that their study has its limits. For example, a paper might briefly mention that pupil size can be related to other systems without going into detail. Their method might count that as a noradrenaline-centric paper, if it doesn't explicitly name those other systems. To check this, they looked at some of the most recent human studies. And they found that while a small percentage did acknowledge the complexity, the vast majority still made overly simple claims. So what does this all mean for us? It means that when you read about studies linking pupil size to your brain activity, it is really important to remember that it is a more complex story than just one chemical. Your pupils are like these super sensitive indicators, reflecting a whole symphony of brain activity, not just a solo performance by noradrenaline. This has big implications for how we understand things like attention, decision-making, and even emotional responses. If we can get better at appreciating the full cast of characters involved in pupil dilation, we can build much more accurate and powerful models of how our brains work. The researchers are essentially calling for a more nuanced look at the data, urging scientists and even peer reviewers to push for a more complete picture. It is a call to see the forest, not just the single, albeit important tree. And that's the fascinating story behind this research. It's a reminder that even seemingly simple observations, like the size of our pupils, can have incredibly complex underlying mechanisms. It's these kinds of deeper dives that really help us understand ourselves better. What do you think about this noradrenaline-centric bias in research? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology and neuroscience. Well, see you next time.